Hi, this is Tomonori, your instructor for Japanese 103, and today we are going to review verbs in chapter 1 to chapter 10 and the verb conjugation. Okay. So first thing is we have two different kind of forms and three different kind of verb types. Right? So the two forms are polite form and plain form, and depend on the teachers, depend on the schools that you went to. Often they call different ways. Sometimes polite forms are called as a must form, or sometimes called long form. Right? So Genki calls it long form. Short form is also called plain form is called short form. So they're pretty much the same thing. Well, for this purpose, we use like polite form and plain form. Okay. And three different types of verbs are verb, do verb, and irregular verbs. The easiest way to find out the verbs is actually go backwards, since there are only two kinds of irregular verbs, which are shimasu, to do, and kimasu, to come. Okay? Since they're irregular verbs, you just have to memorize. There's nothing other than memorization that you can deal with the irregular verbs. Shimasu and kimasu, whenever you hear these two verbs, you just have to recognize them as irregular verbs. So this leaves us verb and do verbs, and it doesn't work always, but the one way to find out whether the verb belongs to verb or do verb is to check the stem. The stem is it's basically the verb, the part of the verb that doesn't change. So for example, if you have nomimasu, the stem is nomi. If you have a tabemasu, the verb stem is tabe. And for other example is like kakimasu, becomes kaki, or mimasu, the stem is mi. So basically we are getting stems. These are stem by removing masu from the polite form, right? So nomimasu, stem is nomi, tabemasu, stem is tabe, kakimasu is kaki, mimasu is mi. Okay, and then if you look at the stem, nomi, tabe, kaki, mi. Okay, if you look at the stem, they always end with I, like nomi or kaki, or e, as in tabe. Okay, usually verb such as nomimasu and kakimasu, actually always verbs end with I. Okay. Okay. So if it's a verb, their stem always ends with I. Okay. If it's a do verb, they often end with E. Okay, but not the always. So the example is tabemasu. So these are do verb, and stem ends with E. Okay. for example, other examples are 寝ます stem is ね 開けます to open stem is 開け so often rule verbs the stem ends with e but not always some rule verbs have a stem ending with I for example 見ます right so 見ます the stem ends with I but 見ます is still a rule verb okay so usually this works but not always but if you don't know the best way to sort of figure out like is to pay attention to how stem ends if it ends with I your best bet is their u verb almost always u verb but there are some exceptions some verbs despite that whose stems is ending with I they can be u verb right so these are the three different verb types okay so going back to the form so we talked about there are two forms the polite form and plain form and each form has present and the past right? If you remember in Japanese there's no future right there's no future in Japanese all futures are embedded in the present so in a way some people say this is non-past or past right so in a way like it's not only about the present it includes everything other than the past okay? But there are two different tenses two different time sets so must form has two different time sets and the same way plain form has also present and past okay and each tense each time has affirmative which is yes and negative which means no right and the past tense also has affirmative negative plain present also has affirmative and negative plain past has affirmative and negative okay so altogether here you have 8 different types of conjugations okay it might be easier to think with the English translation. So polite present affirmative is, for example, it's in English it's like to drink. It's a present affirmative. Polite present negative is don't drink. And past affirmative is drunk. And past negative is didn't drink. Right. So that's the English translation. The same thing. So the same translation applies to the plain form as well, right? So this is drink, this is don't drink, this is drunk, and this is didn't drink. Okay. So let's go back to polite form. So as long as you're in the polite form, the verb types really don't matter because all present affirmative end with masu. All present negative ends with masen. All past affirmative end with mashita. And all past negative end with masen deshita. Okay. So you combine these words, these elements to the stem. So present affirmative of nomimasu is nomimasu. It's the same. The negative is nomimasen. Past affirmative is nomimashita. And past negative is nomimasen deshita. Same way, 食べます is 食べます、食べません、食べました、 食べませんでした。Okay? And then you see that exactly the same words are used regardless of the verb types. The same is true with the irregular verb. します、しません、しました、しませんでした。Okay? So, as far as the polite forms are concerned, all you have to know are these things. Right? ます、ません、ました、ませんでした。Okay? So these are the only things you should remember. So let's go to the plain form. So here, the verb types matter, right? So this is where you have to think about the different verb types. Okay. Again, we're gonna go backwards. We work on the irregular verbs. Irregular verbs, you just have to, like I said, memorize. So for example, します, the plain or short present affirmative is する. Present negative is しない. Past affirmative is した. And past negative is しなかった. Okay? This is just you have to memorize. For 来ます, present affirmative is 来る. 来ない, 来た, and 来なかった. Right? So you just have to know these things. する and could, to do and to come, you just have to memorize. Do verb a lot easier than U verb. Since they're usually just simple combination between the stem and the word, some text phrase. Okay, so for present affirmative, it's る. So we say 食べる, 食べる. 見ます becomes 見る. 寝ます becomes 寝る. 開ける開けます becomes 開ける. 閉めます becomes 閉める. Right? So just simply add the る to the stem. Present negative is ない. So 食べます becomes 食べない. 寝ます becomes 寝ない. 開けます becomes 開けない. 見ます becomes 見ない. So again, stem plus ない. The first affirmative is た. So 食べます becomes 食べた. 寝ます becomes 寝た. 見ます becomes 寝た. Okay. And the past negative is なかった. 食べます食べなかった. 寝ます寝なかった. 見ます見なかった. Okay. So U verbs are easier because for this you just need to know these words. So let's highlight here. Okay, so these are the things you have to know. Right. Okay, and then here's the U verb. U verb is trickier because you have to change a little bit before you apply the rule. Again, we go back to the concept of the stem. So we start with the stem. So 飲みます stem is 飲み. 読みます becomes stem is 読み. 書きます stem is 書き. So 飲み. 読み. 書き. Right? And if you remember, always U verbs, the stems of U verbs end with I. Right? 飲みます、読みます、 kakimasu. For the present affirmative of the plain form, what you do is you change that I sound to U sound. Okay, so the present affirmative of nomimasu is you change this I sound to U, so nomu. Present affirmative of yomimasu is yomu. And present affirmative kakimasu is kaku. Okay, so hanashimasu becomes hanasu. Shinimasu becomes shinu. Asobimasu becomes asobu. Right? So always you use this change I to U to make present affirmative. Okay. So for present negative, we again use the stem, and now I becomes A, and plus nai. Okay. So nomimasu becomes noma nai. Okay. Yomimasu becomes yoma nai. Kakimasu is kaka nai. Okay. So in a way, it's very similar to affirmative, but now you're changing the sound to A sound instead of U sound. Okay. So we are left with this past tense, plain past tense. Here, it's a little bit different. So let's start with the past negative. Right? So past negative, 飲まなかった、食べなかった、しなかった。And then you probably notice that all the past negative end with なかった。Right. And then if you look at the present negative, they also end with the same word, ない。Okay. So if you focus on these, there is a very clear pattern that the ない becomes なかった regardless of the verb types. Okay. It's because the present negative of the verb becomes almost like E adjective, such as 大きい、小さい、高い or 安い. And if you remember, E adjective becomes the past tense by changing E sound to 勝った. Okay? So, 大きい the past tense was big was 大きい、勝った。小さい was small, 小さかった。高い、高かった。安い、安かった。So, that's how you change the adjective from the present tense to past tense, right? We apply the same rule here. So you want to change the present to the past, and we know that in Japanese, the negatives almost like E adjective, and then we apply the same rule, which is changing to E to katta. Okay. So in a way, there's nothing you need to know because you already know about the adjectives. So all you have to know is the plain present negative always end with nai, and they are like an E adjective. Okay. So the last thing is past affirmative. This is a very special conjugation, and it's so special that it has its own unique name. it's called ta form. Okay, and then you might remember we did something very similar, which is te form, right? So here is the te form. Okay. So te form is nom is 飲んで te form 食べる is 食べて te form is irregular します is して okay. Here you have to memorize how you change the verbs to te form. Some people remember this as like 移るって無分んで and there are many other ways to do it, but somehow you have to get used to changing verbs to te form. I think it was about chapter 5 or chapter 6 of the Genki. So if you're not comfortable, you go back and then just practice a little bit. So, but I assume that you have a te form with you under the belt. So if you have a te form, this past affirmative is very simple. It's called ta form, and it sounds like a te form because they are almost the same, except that the te form always end with te. Ta form always end with ta. Okay, so 飲んで the ta form is 飲んだ 食べて ta form is 食べたして ta form is した okay. So if you have a te form, the past affirmative, all you have to know is just change te to ta. Okay. So these are quick summary of the verbs and verb conjugation. We have adjectives and noun. So let's move on to adjectives and noun. And we use exactly the same parameters. So in Japanese, adjectives and nouns, they also have the same parameters. It has a polite form. The distinction between polite form and plain form has a tense, present, and past, and then also has affirmative and negative. So this part remains the same. Okay. Good news is it's a lot simpler than the verb. So adjective, you have to know this. So this one. So です、くないです、かったです、くなかったです。Okay. So present affirmative is this. Present negative is くないです。Past affirmative is かったです。Past negative is くなかったです。Okay. Then you can conjugate all the adjectives. 高いです。高いです。高くないです。高かったです。高くなかったです。or 優しいです。優しくないです。優しかったです。優しくなかったです。Okay? So you just have to know these things, and once you remember, all the adjectives behave the same way. Okay? Let's move on to an adjective. And before we do, I just want to bring your attention to the adjective and nouns. So in Japanese, nouns, they also have a different tense, and they also have the polite form and distinction between polite form and plain form. And if you pay attention to these two, they actually behave exactly the same way with just one little exception. Okay, so let's see. The present affirmative is です。Negative is じゃないです。Past affirmative is でした。Past negative is じゃなかったです。Okay. So, in other words, just by remembering these, ですじゃないです、でしたじゃなかったです、you can also cover nouns because nouns and adjective, they behave almost the same way. Good. So let's practice. 綺麗です、綺麗じゃないです、綺麗でした、綺麗じゃなかったです。有名です、有名じゃないです、有名でした、有名じゃなかったです。Okay? And we do exactly the same thing with the nouns. 本です、本じゃないです、本でした、本じゃなかったです。Okay? Okay. So far, so you just have to know these two things, right? So here and here. And let's compare the polite form and the plain form in adjectives and nouns. In most cases, all you have to do is just remove must. Okay, so let's see. 大きいです。大きいです。大きい。大きくないです。大きくない。大きかったです。大きかった。大きくなかったです。大きくなかった。So these two, the difference is just by removing this. Okay, so you just get the plain form. You get the plain form by just removing this. Okay, I'm gonna skip this for now, but let's start looking at this. 綺麗じゃないです。綺麗じゃない。綺麗でした。綺麗だ。sorry. So let's skip this too, sorry. 綺麗じゃなかったです。綺麗じゃなかった。学生じゃないです。学生じゃない。学生じゃなかったです。学生じゃなかった。Okay. So again, as far as these, some of the adjective nouns are concerned, you just drop this. Okay. The problem is here, this. Okay. An adjective, the present affirmative of the plain form is the. If it's a noun, it's the. And 綺麗でした is だった。綺麗でした is だった。Okay. So this is a little different. You just can remove this because that's how they behave. So you use the instead of this, だった instead of でした。Okay. And that's how you conjugate the nouns, the adjectives and nouns. Okay. So this is pretty much the complete review of the verb conjugations and verb and noun adjective conjugations. We are going to have a few more conjugations to this list, but they are quite simple. It's not as complicated as some of the things we talked about already. It's very usually you just have to know just one single rule, and then you can generate like a new form. You don't need to memorize much about it, but knowing these are very important because this is kind of foundation of the any kind of grammar elements that we talk in Japanese 103 without knowing without being comfortable with these conjugation. It's somewhat difficult to practice and then get used to the practice we do in Japanese 103. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have time to practice more.